Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Brief. Today, we're very fortunate to have David Retter with us. David is an operating partner with Stride Consumer Partners. David, thank you so much for being here.
Chris, it's an absolute pleasure to be on the show today. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. To get us started, David, why don't you tell us a bit about your background and what you're up to lately?
Sure. I mean, as you mentioned, today I'm an operating partner at Stride Consumer. But my background is a bit varied, a lot of it in the consumer space where we do our investing today. I actually started my career at Melissa and Doug, a toy company, in their product development org. And that was an incredible place to start my career, though. I kind of didn't appreciate it all at the time, but working from everything with your creative team on innovation all the way to the end result of doing planograms with your sales team, I really got to understand the full breadth of bringing products to market. And I think as I've reflected over the years, it was such an incredible foundation for me as a starting point to my career. Um, my boss at that time had a pretty wide span of control in the business. And I started to take on more and more special projects for him, odds and ends that sort of fell through the cracks. And at a certain point, found myself helping support our e-commerce and digital marketing teams. Um, and at some point, the head of the digital team decided to leave for another opportunity, and I was kind of the only person around that had any understanding of like how to change over our site, how to send emails, how to sort of set up campaigns, and was joining the weekly calls with our agency partners. So sort of lucked into this really incredible opportunity as e-commerce was really taking off in sort of the mid 2000s, and it was an awesome learning experience for me. But um, after about 6 months or so of them searching for someone to come in and replace the head of or the head of e-commerce, they offered me the job full time. And a credit to some of my self-teaching, learning as we go, desire and really sort of understand what I was doing. But I kind of fell in love with e-commerce and digital marketing because you really got an instant feedback loop on what impacts you were driving with different actions you were taking. And so as we changed marketing campaigns, we saw traffic lift, we saw, revenue lift, sending emails and immediately see what's open rates or clicks. And so it really sort of got me going and got me to really understand action to outputs and
Mhm.
outcomes, which was really great. And I think that change was a really pivotal part in my career because my future maturation up through the ranks was really then within the marketing ecosystem. So from Melissa and Doug, I ended up taking on a job running digital marketing and retention for a brand called Freshly, which was ultimately required for Nestle. I was there for about a year, but what a wild ride. So many talented people and such a fast growing business. I really learned a lot about, how you work with teams when workflows aren't totally polished. You're
Yeah.
trying to sort of learn as you go together and solve problems that, none of us had faced before because Freshly was really leading edge in the meal delivery service and not many people had done what they were trying to do. And so that was an incredible learning experience. But about a year into that, I got an opportunity to run all of marketing for a kids food subscription business called Yumble. And just getting that opportunity to have broader impact across the entire marketing organization was kind of an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So I took a role there at Yumble as VP of marketing. And that was a lot of sort of where I did my growing up as a marketer. I think understanding, that business, some of the trials and tribulations of being a very early employee and trying to build an organization, figuring out what people you need, figuring out what partners you need, figuring out, how you're really going to resonate with customers. There was a lot of work that went on there that was really valuable to, the rest of my career since. And at Yumble, I sort of went from VP of marketing, ended up becoming the general manager of the business and ultimately the COO of that business, working in partnership with the founders and CEO at the time. And it was an incredible growth journey for me getting, um, you know, broader and broader scope. But for me, it was really an outcome of the great work, the team was doing and how we were really focused. Across the board and sort of driving results. It became something where we built great cross-departmental infrastructure and ways of working. And I sort of naturally maturated there as we continued to have to solve bigger and bigger problems for the business. It sort of necessitated my role to grow as we went along that journey. Um, and after about 4.5 years there, I took on a new challenge as chief strategy officer at a connected fitness company called CityRow. That was a really interesting challenge. They were sort of a boutique studio business that also had an at-home ecosystem. And this is about, the era of COVID. And so at-home fitness is really taking off. But their in-studio
Yeah.
ecosystem was then facing headwinds. And so a really interesting role to walk into with totally different challenges. And I think I was really tested there. And how do you learn a really different business? There's not as much that you can draw on that's directly applicable from your past role. Um, but we ended up having a successful outcome there as well. We ended up doing a joint venture and ultimately selling the business to a rowing manufacturer called Water Rower. And so they're just a really fun ride for about a year as that business was sort of, plotting its course. And I ultimately landed after that with the opportunity I have today, which is an operating partner at Stride, and been here almost exactly 3 years now, and it's been an incredible opportunity. I think the biggest part of it for me that I really enjoy is a lot of times when you're down in the trenches working in early stage, consumer brands, specifically those that are on real growth trajectories, but you're facing challenges every day, and you never know,
Yeah.
is it just me? Like, is this happening to other people? And so I think within Stride, we have a portfolio of brands, incredibly talented teams in all of these businesses that I'm fortunate that I get a chance to talk with and learn from. But we've really focused on building an ecosystem where we're learning from each other. And so it's so helpful, oh no, that's a shift that's happening at a category level or at an ad platform level, or at a changes in consumer behavior and buying patterns. And so I think being able to take a zoomed out broad look at, different sectors, different markets, different advertising channels as examples has really been incredibly helpful to sort of understand and give great guidance to our teams. And so this role has been a lot of fun for me because there's so many talented people and so many talented brands in the mix.
Yeah, that's great. What a journey. And my gosh, I mean, there aren't very many people that have had as diverse of a background. I mean, because the exercise space is very different than wooden toys. Because
Yes.
it couldn't be any more different. Um, and yet the lessons you were learning in each of those environments were very right time, right market, being, Freshly, for example, the way that the marketplace was embracing that model, and the direct to consumer model was, the hottest time, probably ever, right? And now it has headwinds that are completely different, compared
Yeah.
to what it was then. But, and to have successful exits, across multiple businesses in multiple categories. I mean, that congratulations. That's very admirable. And to have worn marketing operations, even retail presence, both high street and online. I mean, that's you've touched it all, other than maybe manufacturing, right? You probably weren't in the factory making wooden toys. Um,
No, not in the factory making wooden toys, but spent a lot of time freshly at a facility in Arizona. Um, Yumble had a couple co-manufacturing partners along the East Coast, and so did my fair share on the lines there as I was sort of taking over, operations at different points and learning as we go. But yeah, varied experience. It's all been incredibly helpful, and I think it gives me a lot to draw on depending on what situations and challenges are presented.
yeah.
I'm really grateful for it. I wish I could say it is a more intentional journey along the way. I didn't really have this as an ultimate goal in mind. It sort of happened a bit organically as new opportunities presented itself. My
Right.
only sort of grounding focus was like, hey, do a great job. If it's got your name on it, make sure that you're proud of the work that's being done. Be supportive of your teams. I love seeing other people succeed. I love being around talented people, people smarter than you, and continued learning. Another huge theme for me. If I'm not learning, I'm feeling, really frustrated in my work. It's just such a huge part of what gives me energy on the day to day. And so I think I've had in all places tremendous people to learn from, tremendous partners and teams to work with. And so that has really been what has given me the most joy in sort of this career path.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm sure that diversity of experience has helped you in many respects. And one that probably plays a bigger role these days is your ability to help founders find ways to give their all and contribute to the business without necessarily running it, right?
Hmm.
Because there's, everybody has their superpowers and the way they find their place in growing organizations. When you reach a certain nexus, a lot of times it might be operations, it might be culture, it might be,
Yeah.
whatever, right? And just because you're a great founder doesn't mean you're necessarily a great CEO or COO or CMO, and yet having a trusted advisor on the investment side that can guide you through that has seen the bumps and lumps from being in those roles, I'm sure plays a big factor in the way that you can relate to folks. Let's just talk for a second about the categories. Stride, consumer, like, what's the general, like, position of the organization, and what are your focus areas, and like, what's your reason for being? What problem are you trying to solve in the world today?
Yeah, we're a consumer growth fund. We are fairly focused, within the world of private equity, but we invest in four sectors. So we invest in beauty and personal care, we invest in food and beverage, we invest in active outdoor, which usually takes the view of like performance apparel. We're invested in a brand called TrueWork currently. In the past, we've been investing in brands like Sims Fishing. The partner that heads that sector going all the way back was an early investor in Under Armour. And so that's a sector that I like to describe a little bit because it's not necessarily as tangible as some of the others. And then we do multi-unit services. So those brands in our portfolio in the past have been things like Jenny's Scoop Shops, Dry Bar, Hair Salon, and really focusing on brands that have sort of a physical location and store components or store and service component. And so that's about the sectors that we invest in. And the thread across all of them is we look for passion brands. And so what does that mean? Passion brand to us is sort of, hey, there's been a lot of changes in how brands go to market, how they drive revenue, how they find success over my career, and certainly for a lot longer than that. But things are moving faster and faster
Yeah,
every year as more tools, more opportunities, more distribution channels come into the mix. And so when we say passion brand, we mean, hey, what are the brands that people keep coming back to? Like when you start to determine, hey, do I really need that? Like these are the brands that people say, yes, I do. Like this is a huge part of where I find satisfaction. And so that drives a ton of word of mouth, right? So look, I come from a marketing background. I think there's a lot of incredible things you can do to nudge consumers, but having the tailwinds of a group of passionate consumers that are talking about your product and singing its praises is always going to outduel any sort of sophisticated marketing apparatus that you're able to build. And if you have that, all the marketing you do benefits from it. And so that's huge. And we also look at loyalty and retention, right? Like how often are people coming back up by themselves? What does sort of purchase frequency look like? And we find that where we see really good results on those fronts, you're able to build a lot around that. And so,
yeah,
incredible product, clear consumer passion, those are sort of the foundations, no matter what sector we're investing in. Um, and then the problem we're trying to solve is, I don't know that I would classify it as a problem, but to your earlier comment on founders, like we love this. Like our group here at Stride, we're very focused. You look at the partners that lead each of our sectors, they have 20 plus years of domain experience investing just in those sectors. And
mm,
there's just a lot of heart for it here. And we love partnering with founders. And it's like at the end of the day, that's the passion that we bring to the table. We want to be able to help wherever we can. We've seen the movie before a couple times and can offer guidance from that perspective.
yeah,
We work with a lot of first time founders that are looking for someone to talk through different activities, org design, new distribution channels, brand strategy. There's so many big conversations that founders have to have. And a lot of times they're having them alone or they're, calling their phone of friends from previous jobs and networks or
right.
just kind of going about it themselves. And so I think that's really where we see ourselves fitting in is we want to be a partner that could never quite match the passion of a founder, but we want to get darn close. We've been doing this for a long time, and we hope that our experience can be a welcome addition as founders are sort of plotting their course. And it's been incredibly exciting for me to sort of see the businesses we've invested in and are invested in just find incredible outcomes. Like at the end of the day, we talk about, hey, we want to partner with brands that we believe could be around forever. And like that's really meaningful when you put a product into the market that becomes such a part of sort of the consumer experience that it outlives your time and your partnership. Like that's meaningful. And so I think that's a lot of what we're about here at Stride.
Oh, that's great. I love it. It's interesting you were talking about the passion category, passion around brands, but also passionate advocates, right?
Hmm.
The number of times I've had conversations with founders or groups that are, super excited and trying to raise money or find an investment partner, and they're talking about TAM as this massive universe of people, but they fail to really identify the size of passionate. Like where's the fervor for the experience that they're going to provide uniquely. And if that isn't there, you can have a massive total TAM, but who cares? Like
Yeah.
it's a common flaw I see a lot of times is because they're just smitten by the dollar symbol, the dollar signs or the volume potential. But if you can't spark being a reason to be a part of that, then there's nothing you can do to solve that. That it has to be there or you're dead.
It's a great point, Chris. I mean, we talk a lot about that target consumer bullseye. Like there are concentric circles around that, but like who are you really talking to? And then you look at it in the data, right? Like a lot of our brands that have strong e-commerce business, like you can see explicitly, you know, the 5% of customers that are driving 30, 40% of your, lifetime sales. It's just these things are so important. And like, again, those are the evangelists that are telling everybody else. They're the ones writing the 5-star reviews that are convincing other people to give your product a shot. And so I think it's such an important point that this has to really matter to some group of people.
Yeah.
And that means a lot more than it being potentially relevant to a really large group of people.
Right, right. And what's the permanence potential, right? Because you talked
Mhm.
about it having enduring brands, right? There are so many that come and go, and they're like the new hot nightclub in town, right? It
Yeah.
has an event horizon and then it fades just naturally. And if it, is it Cipriani or is it the once and done that's going to be there for a short period of time? And there's too many
Yeah.
of those, right? So I see that you're a board observer for a number of different companies. Do you mind talking through them? And why don't we start with TrueWorks? Because I noticed late in 2025, you guys hired a new CEO and CMO.
Yeah.
So lots of action there and lots of momentum. And TrueWorks is a good example where the founders have taken on a new role and you've brought in a CEO from the outside. So tell us a little bit about what's up there
Yeah.
and let's kind of go through those that you're on the board of.
I mean, Truework holds a special place in my heart. I think as I was transitioning to a full-time role at Stride, I was lucky enough to take on a fractional role in the marketing department at Truework, and so spent time with them in half two of 2022. And Q4 is peak season for that business, as it is for many. But being a DTC first performance workwear brand, had a lot of action going into half two. So I got to sort of sit in and see how the sausage gets made and sort of roll up my sleeves and be in the day to day. And that team was fantastic, so welcoming, so open. Their CEO and or their founder and former CEO Brian Sikora, he's tremendous. He and I have had a great relationship. Going back to those days, I think I proved my worth a little bit when I was in the day to day with him, but we've maintained an incredible relationship since then. And Brian has been incredibly thoughtful about the business first and foremost, right? Like in underserved community, we just talked about who is this really going to matter for? We're talking about people that are wearing jeans, hoodies, t-shirts out on the job site. They're not getting the protective layers they need. They're not getting the protection from the cold in the summer from the heat. there's so many demands, when you're out on a job site, and the way Brian talks about his point of view on the product, the reason for being, the use cases, like it moves you because you see how much he cares about these people that are going out there building, the office building I'm in today, the home I live in at night, right? Like there's so much to this community that you can really get behind. And Brian brings all of that passion on the day to day. And so I think that's tremendous. And he brought the same thoughtfulness into sort of this search for a new CEO. And Brian has built an incredible business. The scale of it, even just during our investment, has been quite impressive. Um, but Brian, I think, has been doing soul searching around his next chapter. And, I don't want to necessarily speak for him, but he really has the most passion for the product and brand experience and really wants to spend most of his time now in partnership with the new CMO and the existing, product lead, leading those parts of the business. And we have big ambition for distribution channel growth. Um, we have, general sort of revenue ambitions for the business. And Glenn, the now current CEO, has a lot of experience in these areas. And so I think Brian saw an opportunity for incredible partnership of the things where he has a ton of passion and a ton of energy, and then other areas where Glenn can bring a ton of experience of, hey, we got to go do these things. And by the way, I've done a bunch of them before. I have, lost my shirt at the last company on it, so we don't have to do that here. And so that is really, I think, been a lot of what this has been about. It's, again, how do we bring in other smart people to make the best decisions possible? And Brian recognized that this group could benefit from that. And he also benefited from, hey, if I'm going to lean into brand, I need an incredible partner in that CMO seat to do that as well. And so we brought in this woman, Emily, who's now CMO. And she's been there for, a month or two, so not very long, but really have liked what I've seen from her. And I know her and Brian are off to the races on sort of forging the next chapter of what that brand identity is going to be.
That's fantastic. It's an interesting category because uh, there's the legacy brands that span, leisure wear to work wear. Then there's the Carhartts and the kind of industrial wear, that is actually commercial, laundered and made available for a lot of sites. So it's an interesting space to play in, right?
Yeah.
And but there's when I think about it, which I don't know that much about true work, but when I think about it, the opportunity to spark a high utility, high value, but high cultural value, right?
Hmm.
There was a time when I worked on the McDonald's business, and one of the things we observed is that the employees were, in essence, embarrassed they worked there.
Mm.
And so they would change in the back room. They wouldn't wear their shirt or uniform to the location, and the corporate leaders caught on to that and very thoughtfully then worked with some celebrities and designers to create apparel that actually had some cachet to it. And
Yeah.
so what they saw is they became a walking billboard.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many opportunities like that in the way you think about brands and in the
Yeah.
workwear space. It just seems like, there's so much potential there because it's not heavily dominated by brands in the
Yeah.
classic sense, right? So
And it's a real pressure test to exactly what we were just talking about before of like, hey, do you get passionate consumers? Do you get evangelists? If this doesn't work on the job site, you don't
yeah,
have a business very quickly.
right, right.
And so the fact that, Brian and the team have been able to build the business they have, like that credibility existed before we invested. And hey, these pants are awesome. We're going to keep coming back for more. Um, and it really has just continued to evolve as they've added to the product line and found new use cases and new trades and professions to sort of support it. It's been tremendous. And it really comes down to, again, like we have to make incredible product that stands the test of what are the day-to-day rigors of being out on the job site. It's like you're testing it in at height, you're testing it in different climates, you're testing it sometimes stretching across between a ladder and the side of a building. And so there's a lot of opportunity for that to, go the wrong way if you're not constantly making sure that your product is up for the job.
Yeah. So that's TrueWorks. Now you're also a board observer with Odell Beauty, Skin Fix, and Patrick Ta Beauty.
Yeah.
Obviously, somewhat in a similar space, right?
Yeah.
Those are which one of these is not like the other? Well, TrueWorks is the outlier there a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Tell us about those brands.
Yeah, I mean, our beauty sector is around this, right? We have a skincare brand, Skin Fix, hair care brand, Odell, and then, color cosmetic brand and Patrick Top Beauty. And all three of them are incredible. I really enjoy working on those brands, and I've gotten to learn a lot about the beauty sector since joining Stride. But what I will say is that I think overall, 2025 was a big transition year for that sector. And we were lucky to have multiple brands in the space because we saw patterns emerging to my conversation with you earlier that weren't brand specific. We were seeing real changes. And so consumer buying behavior, right? You think about a prestige beauty ecosystem that was dominated by Sephora and Ulta as sort of the primary vehicles to drive awareness, drive trial of brands. We've now seen Amazon growth. We've seen TikTok Shop come into vogue. There's just so many more places for people to discover and try product. And we're
Yes.
seeing shifts in consumer behavior of where they're looking for and when they're ultimately shopping. And so I think that was an incredible insight that allowed all three of those brands to think about, hey, how do we make sure we're showing up where our consumers going to look for products where we know we're the best solution? And so that was sort of one area where we spent a lot of time with our teams this year, getting data, understanding what that, new shopper journey and mix is going to look like, and then working with each of the brands on sort of what the outcomes could be. And I think on the other side was a real transition in what the influencer community has become. And so there's been this back and forth for years now. And I know you know this stuff, Chris, but you think about influencer really rose up as an incredible efficiency vehicle against paid advertising and all of these social channels. And that worked great. Like you could just go out and gift influencers product. If your product was great, they were going to sing its praises. And the cost per impression of that gifted order versus what you were paying for paid, there was no math to be done. You were
Right.
getting such outsized returns. All the social platforms have gotten smart to minimizing organic visibility over the years. And so I think we've really hit sort of a reset there where all of the investments people were made in gifting and upfront partnerships we're getting over time less and less return on visibility on actually driving sales and trial. And then with the rise of sort of content affiliate and TikTok Shop has really pushed this into a new dimension. But Amazon was there previously. I think direct to consumer people were playing in the influencer affiliate space, even on direct to consumer sites. But now with TikTok Shop, you've seen Sephora launch a revised affiliate platform as well. And so there's this big move now to pay for performance affiliates as another dimension here, and we at Stride have sort of spent a lot of time this year of talking to our brands, looking outside, like how has the investment mix changed? Like what is the percentage of dollars going to gifting versus upfronts versus content affiliates? How are we measuring success in you know, sort of lane that had been more amorphous where sure I could look at EMV, but different partners track that differently. It doesn't necessarily correlate directly to revenue, even on a lagging basis. And so we've really tried to get smart too of like how can we build more robust measurement plans around big pushes into sort of more top of funnel or less directly attributable channels. And so there's been a lot of work for us in the beauty sector this year. And thankfully, a lot of smart leadership teams within our portfolio to help sift through all this. But that has been an exciting time because sure, it's upheaval, sure, it's uncomfortable, but there's real opportunity if you can sort of get conviction around an understanding and a path forward. And if you can be a leader and an early adopter of some of these new channels, leaning into TikTok, leaning into a creator affiliate, um, prestige beauties now, going to Amazon. And we probably thought that would be one of the last dominoes to fall as a category. And so I think that for me has been fun. It's kind of, hey, we got to do new things. We have to
Right.
understand the ecosystem and we have to sort of plot a course forward. And so that's been really, a fun challenge to sift through this year.
Yeah, there's the platforms have a lot of control these days, don't they? They can, I mean, and as a marketing agency, we face a scenario where, Meta's offering turnkey solutions to, large spenders where you
Yeah.
can basically they act as agency and, network or channel and have the direct to consumer commerce platform built in. And, they the only good thing I would say is that as a marketing agency, we see their motive is about more money for them, not necessarily more money for the companies. And that's where we can interject ourselves and provide value. But you're right. I mean, the test and learn requirements today are more complex than they've ever been.
Yeah.
Especially with the advent of AI and the way that commerce is now happening in even more unique places than we'd ever imagined. In browser, right? I mean, it's now happening in browser with Comet and Atlas and other tools that are attached to these LLMs. So the day of going into a Google search and then clicking the shopping tab and then clicking and 5 clicks later, you might actually be a place where you can buy.
Yeah.
It could be one click and out, it's,
Yeah.
and so brands that aren't present, even if they've had success in classic channels, oftentimes they're missing out in the modern consumer's mind.
Yeah. I think what has been really surprising to me, Chris, is, and I don't have the exact set here, but I've looked at some different surveys around the amount of trust equity people are putting in the results they get back from AI has been shocking
Yeah,
to me, for lack of a better word. And I'm wondering, hey, is there going to be some reset here as like people try more and more of these recommendations and are naturally underwhelmed? And I also think a lot of these, AI shops have work on their hands to like, hey, if you're going to start turning this into PPC on Google, you know, you're sort of eroding some of that trust naturally, right?
yeah,
Just by allowing people to sort of pay for those placements. And so I am I think it's definitely something where early adopters have done incredibly well with sort of getting that visibility and driving awareness and trial. And I encourage, all of our brands to come up with a strategy for sort of AI and intent related search in general. And we're working through that. But for me, that's what I'm going to be very focused on over the next sort of months and years is, hey, how does the ecosystem evolve and how much are we moving just to like, oh, AI said it, I go to like, actually, they've steered me wrong now a few times. I think we're in the earliest stages, so they
yeah.
haven't necessarily gotten that feedback loop of, hey, are these products actually good?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I think and part of it is for certain categories, the opportunity or the risk cost is not super high, right? It's a $12 or $20 item, and okay, it
Yeah.
wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. I mean,
Hmm.
that's where TikTok and I mean, the early days of Temu, even, I mean, I
Yeah.
got something for $7, and then you realize
Mhm.
it's disposable and not really good. In fact, it probably has toxic chemicals or whatever, right? The trust
Yeah.
starts to erode very quickly. Um, but I do think that it's variable depending on, is it a renewable? Is it a fundamental like, is it something that you really use a lot and therefore
Yeah.
if you're, moisturizer, for example, or skin,
Yeah.
management stuff. The my wife goes through a variety of different brands, but always has some that are in her core.
Yeah.
And, and the trust factor just is there from the evidence of the relationship she's had, and she'll work hard to maintain a relationship with those brands. And I think that's the key is how do you be present when things change,
Yeah.
but also how do you make sure that the trust is delivered through the
Yeah.
experience, and so you're not just getting somebody to buy it because you reached them at a vulnerable time, but you've actually aligned with their interest and it's a good fit, right? Because otherwise it does erode your trust factor pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I mean, we're lucky, I think, since our thesis really rests on the fact that there's there's a real reason for being for these products. We feel pretty good about once you try it, you're going to love it. And that's core to all of this. But I think you raise a really good point here. So I'll talk about Skin Fix specifically for a minute. Getting someone to try a new moisturizer, very challenging,
Hmm.
right? And so you do have those very specific moments of, I'm not getting what I need. I had a bad reaction, right? Like there's a very present moment um, where that consumer's in market again. And we have to make sure if we're skin fix, like, hey, you got science backed, you have incredible clinicals on all your products, you solve real consumer needs. I think, AEO, GEO, whatever we want to call it these days, there are brands where it has an outsized opportunity. And that would be one of them because to our conversation earlier, like, sure, a moisturizer could be great for every person in the United States, but who is that group of people that are really going to love the product? This is that sort of conversation again, where, hey, it is very rare that someone that has a moisturizer and has been buying it consistently for 5, 10 years, whatever it is looking to maybe try something else. And so I think for brands like that, you really need to make sure when people are in that evaluation stage, they're either trying to learn about new brands or they're trying to compare brands. You have to really own that space. And so I
Yeah.
think for SkinFix, that's been a huge part of their effort is, hey, we know we have opportunity with first time moisturizer buyers, but um, smaller group, that group usually comes in at a lower price point, isn't necessarily going to look to a prestige brand for their first moisturizer. And so if you have sort of structural limitations there, it comes back to this, which is, hey, change cost in this category is expensive and consumers are very thoughtful before they make one. And that means that this is a point where you have to kind of overinvest in this
Sure.
space.
Yeah, love it. Um, in late 25, you posted on LinkedIn a piece that about marketing impact hierarchy,
Mhm.
and the framing on it was what you're missing when you focus on creative. Tell us what led to that, and tell us a little bit about your thinking in that hierarchy and the way you come at it.
Yeah. Well, what led to that is probably a career of frustrating conversations. But I think we've all been there, right? Like marketing is for the good and the bad of it, because I think there's a ton of good. It's the area of the business where everyone thinks they have a right to weigh in because we're all consumers.
Right.
And so, like, when I'm sitting in there as, head of retention or VP of marketing or whatever it was, like I never went a day without someone lobbing some piece of feedback over the fence about an email, an ad that was in market, a direct mail piece they got in the mail. And I think for me, we are then absorbed with what's right in front of our faces. And so for so much of my career, I spent a lot of time at the creative level of like creative iteration, A/B testing, right? And then you have the metas of the world. Um, they just supercharge this where now I can throw 100 pieces of creative into the ecosystem and let it be sort of judge, jury, and executioner of what quote worked. Um, and that moved the hands, that moved the power from the creative teams over to the performance marketing teams. So they're like, no, 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 we will tell you what worked. And I was on that team, but it was an interesting sort of channel dynamics, but it sort of, I think, compounded what the problem here was. And so for me, the problem is it's like, guys, you think about creative and what is it essentially meant to do? Like, it's going to, if it does well, it's going to drive awareness at a certain point in the funnel. It's definitely going to drive recall and clarity of message if it's done well. It's like, okay, that's great. At other areas, it's going to, be something that reinforces, consideration and drives someone towards purchase. And at the end of the day, like if we think about, okay, a direct consumer business, it's going to drive improved click-through rates. It's going to get more traffic on site and hopefully your creative down the journey from there. And your site experience drive conversion. And so it's a massively important part of this ecosystem. But there's times where I've looked a little bit further up, the impact hierarchy for me. And I'm like, hey guys, if we spent all of our money in meta, where CPMs seem to continue to go up year after year, At points, sometimes doubling, and now what is it, 20 to 30% on average per year the last couple of years. Um, and we don't find more efficient ways to serve our media and ways to get it in front of someone's eyeballs more cost effectively. We can't make our creative better faster enough that it's going to outpace those increases in sort of cost to serve advertising. And I've had this conversation a ton where they're like, we don't know, like, our click-through rates are better this year. I was like, yeah, your click-through rate's 10% better, but your advertising costs are 30% higher. And so, like, you weren't going to outrun it even though you got better. And oh, by the way, you spent hundreds of hours clawing for that 10% improvement. I could have spent an hour telling you to go hedge this with some TikTok advertising that was 30% lower on a CPM basis. And by the way, pretty similar creative outputs work well on the channel, right? And so it's sort of okay having that conversation. You move it even further up the ladder and you think, okay, not just what ad channels I'm using, what percent of my marketing budget is going to content creation versus actually serving content? You get into sort of the working to non-working mix. And I've looked at budgets where I'm like, man, 50% of my budget is non-working dollars. Only 50% of what I'm spending this year is going to actually put content into the market. If I could find a 10, 15, 20% flip on that, get to 60-40, get to 70-30, you now compound an even greater outcome because you just have more and more dollars going to it. And so that post was really about, hey, like, let's look at effort and outcomes. Let's look at how much time it spends to make creative incrementally better versus how much time it takes to test and learn and find a way with new advertising channels where you have an opportunity, whether it's from an efficiency basis, from a, improved audience targeting basis. There's, many different rationales for different channels. Or do we zoom all the way out to the overall budget and look at where else we're spending dollars? And I found I can spend a lot less hours further up that impact hierarchy and drive a ton more value into the business. But because those things aren't really day to day, you're just reacting to the channels you're in, you're reacting to the content that you're serving, and you don't zoom out to have those conversations that I think have, for me personally, yielded incredible outcomes, and being able to sort of do it much more efficiently. And what does that then allow you to do? It allows you to exhale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we all make better decisions when we're not just sort of on that hamster wheel of iteration.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't see in your chart, which I mean, you can't have everything in a single chart, but I thought was a good chart the way you put it together, on a tier basis and the way to focus, right? Because half the battle's focus and having a smart test and learn methodology. But one of the things I didn't see there, and I'm curious how you think about it, is um, how to reduce friction for consumers and improve customer satisfaction. We see that as whenever somebody says to us, "How can we improve our commercial KPIs?" Our answer is always the same. It's improve your satisfaction KPIs. And then they're
Hmm.
like, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, therein is often the problem because a lot of brands don't measure customer satisfaction other than superficially, and
Yeah.
look, even something as simple as saying, "Can you go from a 3-click to purchase to a 2-click?" Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like, think about how that feels to the user, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not always sometimes you need 5 because you
Yeah.
need that consideration process to be there. But if you can shorten it at any time, it almost always results in a happiness quotient that pays dividends, exponentially.
Yeah.
How do you think about that, and what are you advising people?
Yeah, it's a really important point. And so I think just at the end there, it's like, look, you got to have an always on evaluation of, if it's your direct to consumer business, it's always on CRO. Like, these metrics are so measurable. We can see from start to finish logging user journeys. And that's vitally important because you're right. Sometimes it is going from 3 to 2. Other times it's no, we're not explaining something. We got
Right.
to add a step. But I think monitoring that, understanding, hey, where is the biggest drop as we move towards the end of the funnel? Obviously, super important. But zooming out a bit again, it's to your point as well. Customer satisfaction is not just the CSAT score from people that came in with a problem and you helped fix it. we make sure that all of our brands are tracking NPS, right? Like,
Yep.
what does it look like from all your buyers, even if they didn't proactively reach out? What is their satisfaction with the product, with the experience? And we learn a ton from harvesting that data. Zoom out even further, we make sure we do consumer insights work on at least an annual basis. And so
Good.
this is at a minimum sort of a brand health dip, which measures, your awareness, consideration, brand clarity, likelihood to purchase, retention, et cetera. But then also measures your markers around, hey, like, how do we perceive this brand in a market? What is the sentiment around it? How has that maybe changed year over year versus the core competitive set? Where are you winning hearts and minds, and where are you not within sort of the group of consumers that are most likely to buy your product? And I think on all of those metrics, you get incredible results, right? In some, it's like, hey, why haven't you bought again? You're not available where I most often shop. And it's like, that's the beauty sector this year. It's, hey, it used to be only Sephora is where I went for all my beauty purchases. Now I have a bunch of, stuff in my regimen on Subscribe and Save on Amazon. We're seeing that trend change over time, and that's customer satisfaction. It's like, meet my consumer where they are.
Yep.
Reducing friction is not just on your .com experience. It's reducing friction everywhere your consumer is going to learn about, to try, and to ultimately purchase your products.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Um, as we ramp up here in 2026, what are some of the things that you're advising people to do less of that they might have done in the marketing stack or marketing ecosystem last year? Because obviously, there's always got to be a healthy test and learn. But like, are you saying less PPC, less programmatic? I mean, are there any obvious areas that you're kind of advising people to at least be circumspect about what you did last year relative to this year?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first broadly, we're big advocates for zero-based budgeting. So um, I've received a ton of frustration, both personally in the business and, sitting at Strides multiple business where I'm like, oh, this is a roll forward of last year's budget where we have a new revenue target from finance. So we're going 10% up every year we spent money last year. And we really advocate to, okay, let's go back, do a lessons learned at the end of the year. What worked really well? What didn't? What action are we going to take in 2026 because of it? And that can be different for different businesses. But okay, so now that's foundational. Let's now look at our broader brand and go to market strategy. Anything from our lessons learned or from broader consumer insights or category work change the sort of 3 to 5 year outlook and plan? If not, let's make sure we weave in our lessons learned into that same go to market, and let's build up from there about what we need to do. And we find that yields to a ton better outcomes because businesses, particularly in growth stage, one of the biggest enemies is inertia. Is we just do this every day. That meeting's on the calendar every 2 weeks. We go to it. We try to get better, and you don't stop yourself for a second to say, should we even be doing this anymore?
Yeah.
And so I don't know necessarily, Chris, that I have a good specific example for you because I think it's so brand dependent.
Yeah.
But to me, it's, hey, let's look at everything, right? I think we have brands this year that I thought took incredible strategies into programmatic TV. Turns out the CPMs on those were $30, $40, and they did a lot better on buying remnant linear TV for $2, which, like, when I looked at the different proposals, I'm like, oh, this incredible audience targeting strategy, pulling in retail data and dropping it onto STV and CTV looks a lot cooler. Looks like we're going to get a real rich audience, but the math didn't work on the dollar amount. And so I think it's just, you got to know um, what outcomes you're going for. And then you have to have sort of that honest assessment at year end. Um, and I think the only answer that's not acceptable, it's like, well, we did that last year. And so there's a lot of great work that's been done across the portfolio this year. And I think we're going to double down on a ton of it. But making sure each of our brands goes through this real, measured evaluation process, I think we're just better for it ultimately.
Got it. Got it. If I were to ask people you've worked with, what are the Davidisms? Are there some standard things or sayings or framing tools that you use? I know if you were to ask my kids, like, what are some of dadisms, they would have a few grown worthy moments to share. But do you have any like things that
Yeah.
are that people you know know you for in the way you kind of approach things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the rallying cry that I've had that I can't take credit for, but I think it's something, I came across in my career from a mentor, and we've continued to sort of hammer this drum. It's right. Is like, you want to do just more high impact things and do less of sort of small impact things. And this takes the framework of big changes to big things, and you want to avoid small changes to small things. So it's sort of a four-box grid, right? But we really champion that here, where it's, hey, a lot of times you feel like you're having a good day at the office because you plowed through 150 emails, but it was, the review of the consumer insights report that you got that's still sitting on your desk that was the most important thing. But cracking a 120-page document is daunting to all of us. And so we really talk about that framework, which is, hey, small changes to small things. You're just never going to get there in a growth stage business. Big changes to small things. Wow, like you're making a big change to something that has a low impact. Small changes to big things, super important. That we're going to need a lot of those. They're going to get us there over the years. But it's really when we go to sort of exit a business, there's like 3 to 5 things that the entire leadership team reflects on. It's like, this what mattered.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of us, or I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I certainly for a long time was not going to work every day in mind of 3 to 5 things. I always had a list of 100.
Yeah.
And I do find as I talk to more people that that's a common refrain. And so I think I've really been pushing a lot towards, hey, what is the most important thing we need to get done? And it may not be one task today. It may be a conversation we have to take on for the next couple of months, but like we have to devote the energy share to it that is required because of the opportunity that's in front of us.
It's such great advice. The amount of time that people, I mean, in the startup community in particular, pivotitis is just like or trying to, do line extensions or offering extensions that instead of sticking to your knitting and being really, really good at a few things, it's astounding how often that occurs. And one of the things we think a lot about is time to value. And that
Yeah,
just, it totally lands on what you're talking about is how do you take the limited time you've got, limited resources you've got, and make them work as hard as possible. And that quadrant approach is really smart. And
yeah,
it's actually kind of the foundation of the podcast of Beyond the Brief, right? Look past what you've got in writing, because you need to be looking at it constantly to try and find that magic that will continue to propel you forward, right? It's
yeah,
it's it's as try as you might to put it down and only stick to the plan. The world shifts. The consumer's behavior shifts constantly, and
yeah,
the media market changes constantly. So you have to adapt and adopt, but you have to be judicious with your time and be very
yeah,
thoughtful about it. Otherwise, you'll just get caught up in doing things with low value that we see. That's why the failure rate's so high, right? I mean, or there's a period where they're successful because they're doing enough of the right things, but eventually it collapses in on itself over the weight of trying to do too many things.
absolutely.
So common. So as we get ramped up in 2026, are there any specific things for any of your portfolio companies or for the organization that you want to make sure our listeners hear that are coming up?
I mean, I think a lot of exciting things across the board. We have some big product launches coming up across the portfolio. I don't want to steal the thunder of any of our brands specifically, but really looking forward to having some incredible campaigns for new product and the marketing efforts that surround them in Q1. And so we have a lot to look forward there. On the Stride side, we're constantly working on a number of fronts, but I think one of the big areas for us is trying to find some focused and tangible applications of AI. And I think we're all working through this together and have been a mix of, underwhelmed to inspired across the learning experience there. But we're seeing more and more sort of specialized products here that do a pretty discrete task. And I've been more and more encouraged with some of these as real solutions for our work here at Stride and also across the portfolio to really try to unlock some bandwidth for the team.
Well, that's awesome, and they're lucky to have a experienced marketer like you to help translate that across the portco. Because I mean, you know, there's a lot of investment partners that are focused on the commercials more so than the, how do we accelerate the business and how do we share across the portfolio companies the learnings that can be valuable. Because they're the test and you have a view to the test and learn methodologies going across dozens of companies,
Yeah.
across the organization, and they wouldn't, and that's hugely valuable and good for you for sharing that. Um,
Yeah.
and David, such an impressive background, and you're only just getting started. You're in your early 20s, and ramping up your career. He says with a smile. Um, the Hollywood wants to do a biopic on you, probably the beginning of a series of movies. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But what would the name of the film be, or who would play you, or what's the plot or theme?
I'm gonna pivot this one a little bit on you, Chris, because I was joking. We had the same question asked at one of our offsites this year, and I think I titled the movie "Watch Something Else." Um, but reflecting on this, if we're doing sort of the first part of the story, I honestly the biopic has to be on my mother. She was the first person to go to college in her family, paid her way through one of the first female MBAs out of East Carolina University, and a ton of my success and the work ethic that I've had and sort of the way I treat people comes from her. And so I think a biopic on her, maybe played by Julia Roberts, I think could do an awesome job. Would be great. But I think it starts there, and I just really want to credit her for a lot of what I've been able to accomplish in my career.
I love that. That's absolutely, and I could say the same for my mom, and the good fortune of two great parents, but my mom in particular played an instrumental role. So that's good for you, David. And good for her for
Yeah.
putting her time and effort, into giving you that, and then you actually using it. Like, there's lots of kids
Yeah.
that don't, right? Lots of
Yeah.
kids that
Yeah.
don't.
Well,
Um,
another good part of her parenting is not using it didn't seem like an option.
Right. Right. Yeah, it wasn't a question of if. You will.
Exactly.
That's awesome. For those that wanna reach out to you, David, what's the best way to reach out or find you?
Yeah, I think finding me on LinkedIn is great. It's just LinkedIn dash David dash Retter. And so happy to receive any notes there. And no, Chris, just really appreciative of the opportunity to speak with you today. Always fun to talk shop.
No, David, I absolutely loved it. Could go on forever. In fact, what we're gonna have to do is do another one in a year's time so we can catch up and see what's changed in the world between now and then. Um, and with that, we'll conclude this episode of Beyond the Brief. David, thanks again. And everybody, here's to great marketing and great outcomes.